Hi everybody, Mr. Mahara here, and I'm going to take you through some notes that I made for Act 1, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet. You should be filling out your own chart, the act chart that I posted on the Google Classroom. Please use this video to add to it, okay? It doesn't matter if they're my notes, they will help you in the long run for creating and constructing your own news article and your essay, okay? So, we are looking at Act 1, and I'm going to start with a very brief plot summary. So, what happened in Act 1, Scene 1? So, first thing, setting. We are in Verona, and we are in a public setting or a public place. And the first thing that this scene opens up with is a full scale riot to illustrate the extent of the feud between the Montagues and the Capulets. Remember, there are two opposing families within this city. Okay, and we see that Montague's servants are arguing with Capulets, all right, and it ends up becoming physical. And then we get introduced to Tybalt, okay, and Tybalt is a predominant and very well known Capulet throughout the family and will be a key character throughout the play. And he challenges Benvolio to a duel or a fight, and Benvolio is a Montague, and so they greatly oppose each other. Benvolio was also Romeo's cousin and one of his best friends. Okay, and basically what happens is we have a full-scale brawl between all the Montagues and Capulets, and we even have Lord Capulet and Lord Montague involved in the fight. So we have the full brawl, okay, between all family members, except we do not see Romeo at this point. All right, so I'm going to take you through some of the characters. So what is the purpose of the servants throughout this? And we know that the brawl starts with them, okay? We have some banter, some insults going back and forth between the Montague and Capulet servants, and the purpose of them is to show that the extent of the feud goes from the lords and even the servants. So people at the top of the totem pole and the bottom. They all hate each other equally, and they all have this animosity for each other. Okay? So that is the purpose of the servants. Next, we are introduced to Benvolio, and we see that he has traits of being rational, sensible, and a kind of peacekeeper throughout this story. And that's evident from the first scene of the play. Okay? So initially, he is trying to break up the feud and de-escalate the situation. So he says, part fools, you know not what you do. Okay? So stop fighting. Okay? You know you do not want to do this. And he even says, I do, but keep the peace. So that is his goal throughout this scene. Okay? And this really is opposed to the characteristics of Tybalt. So on your chart, you should have Benvolio, and I would like you to write that he is sensible and a peacekeeper. And you can even write the quote, one of the quotes that I wrote down here. And if you notice, I put, I put the how you cite a specific line. So you'll see 1.1, that means Act 1, Scene 1, and then a comma, line 55. And that's so you can find this quote if you ever need to use it for any writing task going forward. So that's how you should cite your lines. Next, so Tybalt. So we know that Tybalt confronts Benvolio and wants him to fight. And Benvolio describes him as the fiery Tybalt. So we know that other characters' perception of Tybalt is that he is aggressive. And then he goes on to reinforce that trait by saying peace, and in response to Benvolio, I hate the word. And he is very threatening. He even says, look upon thy death. Have at thee, coward. So he's very insulting, and we see that he is very aggressive, and he absolutely wants to fight anybody that is a Montague. Okay? So you see the opposition between Benvolio and Tybalt, okay, in terms of their characteristics. Next, we move over to the prince, okay, the Prince of Verona. So the prince ends up breaking up this whole feud, okay? And he is extremely angry with both families. He uses rich language, okay, which suggests he is very intelligent and highly respected. And when he says he is moved, okay, that means he is cares, okay, and he's truly affected by the situation that's going on. Um, One thing that is very important is that he talks about how there were three civil brawls. Okay, this means this was not the first full-scale brawl between the Montagues and the Capulets. In fact, there has been three prior brawls before this, and now he has had enough. So he implements a harsh law of torture and death, okay, if they are to fight again like this, okay, because he will not have it and he will not stand for this within his own town or city of Verona, okay. He asks Lord Capulet and Lord Montague to speak to him in private, okay, suggesting that he will talk to them about this situation and what's going on between the families. All right. So our first impression of the prince is that he just wants control of his society, but it's becoming very hard to tame the feud between the two families. All right. And we see that it is hard because the people with the most power in the families, Lord Montague and Lord Capulet, are even involved in the fight themselves. All right. Now, that's kind of going over the brawl and the characters involved in the brawl, but you'll notice we have not seen one of our title characters, Romeo, yet. Okay, so where is Romeo? So we actually have an insight into Romeo's character before he's on stage, and this is seen through the dialogue between Benvolio and Lord Montague. So Benvolio's language changes from plain to romantic when he talks of Romeo, which suggests this is how Romeo speaks, and in a sense, this is how Romeo feels about certain topics. So we learn from this dialogue between Benvolio and Montague that Romeo likes to be alone as of late. Um, so it said he's most sought where most might not be found. So he doesn't want to be found right now. And he's been crying. And that's the metaphor that they make is tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew. Okay, meaning that his tears are like the morning dew on the ground. And he also locks himself in the room during the day and then wanders at night. So he is private in his chamber, pens himself. So he locks himself in his own room, and he's become very secretive. So Benvolio and Montague, they're kind of worried about their son and cousin, why he's so upset as of late. And so Benvolio uh, suggests that he talks to Romeo because, as a friend, he's more likely to tell Benvolio rather than his father. So, Benvolio goes to seek out Romeo, and we see in a discussion or conversation between the two that he's actually in love with a woman named Rosaline. And she symbolizes, right from the first scene of the play, Romeo's tendency to fall in love very easily and quickly. And we see through this conversation between Benvolio and Romeo that Romeo has a very, very dark view of love right now. Because he's very sad because he loves Rosaline so much, or he claims that he does, and it is unrequited. She does not reciprocate back, and she does not love him. This is shown when he says, out of her favor where I am in love. So he loves her, and she doesn't. Poor guy. Now, what's interesting to make note of Romeo and he hasn't known her for very long. And the only thing that he can describe about her is that she's fair. And in Shakespearean language, whenever the word fair is being used, it means beautiful. So he describes her, all of his observations are very superficial. Also, whenever the language of foul is being used, that can suggest being ugly. So, moving on from Romeo's view of love between the first scene, we also get Romeo's view on the Montague and Capulet feud. Oops. He regrets the absence of love in the Montague and Capulet's dealings with each other. He says, "Here's much to do with hate, but more with love." So he wishes that there was more love between the two families, which could foreshadow something moving forward, because we saw in the first scene that a lot of family members between the two sides only have hate for each other, while here's Romeo wishing that there was love between the two families. So, why is this scene important? Well, first of all, it shows it very much introduces us to many key characters, and Shakespeare does this masterfully by having all sorts of key characters within the first scene in a brawl with each other. So you get to see a lot of the characteristics of key characters, but also you get to see the long-standing feud and how deep it runs between the servants to um, the lords and everybody really uh, within Verona. Okay, all Montagues and Capulets hate each other. Also, what this scene does is it shows us who Romeo is and basically how he feels about love right now, which is very important because we know that that's such an important theme throughout this play. We get to see how Romeo feels, as well as where he's at right now. Also, what this does is it shows us the masculine pride um, throughout many characters in the play, meaning that they are so proud of who they are and um, showing off their aggressive nature and their masculine bravado, that that's actually the cause of the conflict. They're so proud of who they are, and they have so much hatred for the other side, meaning the other family, that they want to show it off. All right, so that's scene one.